Yeah, so it's always gonna be something new. When a person decides to be themselves, they offer something no one else can
Yeah, because once you be you, who could be you but you?
Hi, welcome to Athbheochan. I'm Blue Niall, a musician, artist and designer from Dublin. In recent years, I've found myself increasingly drawn to exploring, through my work, Irishness and aspects of Irish identity. I started sampling traditional music, writing lyrics in Irish and linking with like-minded people through collaborations. I started to notice that I wasn't alone. In the cultural fields of Ireland, something very interesting is happening. Athbheochan, or Rebirth, is a radio show about a new Celtic revival, looking at the explosion of new Irish art forms, utilising Irish accents, Irish language, samples of Irish music and colloquialisms, along with the renewal of interest in Celtic and pre-Celtic cultures on the island, practices and aesthetics in Ireland and beyond. The show features music and conversation, and each episode will focus on a theme. I wanted to speak to a forward-thinking, young Irish generation that's fed up with certain aspects of the country and its culture, but immensely proud of other aspects. People who don't speak Irish but would like to learn, who are interested in Celtic mythology, and also love global music such as hip-hop and underground club music. SBTV are running a series of 6 episodes of Athbheochan to celebrate St. Patrick's Festival. This episode is called Todhcaí and focuses on the future. There's an interview with Fionn Kidney from Common Knowledge, a social enterprise that's equipping people with the skills to create their own homes and live more sustainably. You'll also hear songs selected by Toké O Drift, an upcoming Dublin producer, of songs by artists that he feels are exciting and pointing towards the future. If you like what you hear, please follow me at blue_Niall_ on Instagram, or drop me an email at bluenileblue@gmail.com and subscribe to the mailing list via the link below. You can also keep in touch with my guests. I've dropped all their social profiles below and would highly recommend following these interesting, creative people who I believe are going to shape the future of the country. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Gurmila Mahagat, Agus Fionn, delighted to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming to speak to us at Athbheochan. For those who don't know about Fionn Kidney or about Common Knowledge, could you please start by just telling people a little bit of who you are, where you've come from, what you're doing at the moment, and what you've kind of got on the horizon?
Sure. So, I'm Fion Kidney. I'm based in Dublin at the moment, but moving west soon. And I'm moving west for a new social enterprise I'm working on with my co-founders, Harrison Gardner and Erin McClure, which is called Common Knowledge. And our mission is really to empower people with the skills and community and resources to create a more sustainable life for themselves. And we're working to do that by bringing courses on, for example, how to build your own house, how to mend the stuff you have, how to grow your own food. We're doing community projects where we work with other nonprofits and social enterprises to create buildings for them, to work on them with projects that they're working on. And we're also doing some R&D, research and development around materials like, for example, sheep's wool, which is often discarded and thought of as without value, but actually has incredible insulating properties and can be used as a building material, very sustainable building material, with the right, infrastructure behind it. So we got our hands full at the moment, but the big focus is on our courses, which start in April. It's a really exciting project. I'm really buzzed about it. It's getting great reaction from people, which is really nice in the last few weeks as well. Before Common Knowledge, I was working in the innovation space, and that's such a jargony word, it means so many things. But wherever I've been, it's been floating around. Initially, I was working in Science Gallery in Dublin, and then later Science Gallery International, which was the project to create 8 galleries around the world based on the model at Dublin. And I know maybe your listeners will be aware that the one in Dublin has recently closed, but I'm very hopeful that it will reopen within a couple of years and better, stronger, bigger than ever before, because it's a really special place. And something we have, we should be very proud of. One of our greatest cultural exports. There's science galleries all over the world now based on the one in Dublin. So I worked there for 5 years, which was a wild ride, and really at the time when science, technology and arts were all kind of coming together and swirling as a way of reckoning with what's happening in the world, with the proliferation of technology, with, I guess, the internet and digital media enabling so much more connectivity between ideas and people. So that was really a really fertile space to be in for those few years. And then I went to work in commercial innovation, and I worked in a company, a consulting company. And my most recent project there was to build a team of social scientists looking at, I guess, the implications and considerations for technology and the development of technology from a human standpoint. So that was definitely interesting. But I moved on from that last year. And since then, actually the week after I finished working there, I decided I needed to get away from the laptop. And I knew that Harrison was running these pop-up building courses. And I just loved the idea of getting away from the laptop for a week. I don't know about you, but I spent a large amount of my time in the lockdown just in front of a laptop, and on video calls the whole time. And the prospect of just being out in the open air, working with my hands, working with other people to create stuff was just so appealing. And in a way, I've never left that building site, because it was there that I got chatting to Harrison about the potential for us to work on this concept, common knowledge, which would look to create a broader set of skills sharing programs. So to enable people to feel a bit more a sense of agency, to create the life that they want, more joyful, more affordable, more sustainable life, which I think is something that's on everybody's minds at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, loads there, but common knowledge, it's a fascinating project. It's something that I'm personally really excited about. And I'd love to ask you, like, why is common knowledge important for Ireland right now? And we've talked a lot about the country, where it's going. What kind of moment do you feel like we're in as a country right now, and how does common knowledge speak to that moment, and why do you feel like it's important for the country today?
Well, I think, we can all say that Ireland has come on a long way in the last 20 years, but it's astounding, frankly, that we still can't create accessible housing for people. That it's still so difficult to finance a home, to find a home, to rent a home. And also, we've got this backdrop of the climate emergency now, which is starting and beginning to reshape the way we live. And kind of, I guess, these two factors together, the challenge in securing housing, and doing it in a sustainable, affordable way, make it a very good moment to bring forth these skills which we used to have. I mean, our grandparents, definitely my grandparents, taught me how to do stuff in workshops and on the farm and that kind of stuff that I've learned and I've kept with me all my life. And I love making stuff and playing with stuff and be kind of like 10% handier than the average person in the house, but 90% less handy than, for example, my colleague Harrison in Common Knowledge, who's a builder and a teacher. But these skills are so valuable. And I think that if you can start off doing simple stuff for yourself, for example, if you can put a shelf up, or if you can fix the thing that's broken, you're giving yourself just that extra bit of confidence to do the next big thing. And I think if we can empower each other to take those small steps, they'll lead on to bigger things for all of us. And we can start to empower not just ourselves, but each other and our communities.
Absolutely. And with that, that's such an interesting way that you put it. And I think a lot of people would relate to that about, maybe not feeling when we're confronted with something where we need those practical skills, just realizing just how few of them that the most of us actually have. Like, what are the barriers to acquiring those skills? And we've touched on this before in conversations, like, because I know at a different point, ideas that you're working with were around queerness and spaces where queer people can come and make things. And do you feel like this is equally applied to everyone? Do you feel like is there a masculinity thing in the kind of whole making and building things? Like, how do you see that kind of inclusion question around these practical skills?
I mean, it's interesting because many of the people who take our courses are identifying as female. And I think also kind of telling us just anecdotally that, they never felt they got to do these things when they were younger because it wasn't for women, And, personally, when I was on the building course and I bumped into a couple of people I knew who were queer people, and just sitting in that context of being, we were building a packing shed for an organic farm in Westmeath and doing it together and learning how to build and doing that. And sitting beside the campfire with these two queer people chatting away about how nice it was to be connecting in this context that felt almost a little bit out of place as a kind of a place for queer community to build. And I know there are queer communities all over the world which are, very connected to nature and alternative systems. But just my experience in Ireland has always been that queer communities, the congregation cities, we connect in clubs on the dance floors. We march together when we've got something to sort out. And there's an amazing sense of camaraderie. But just being out in nature and using our hands to do stuff, I think, was just really nourishing personally for me. And I think that the more I speak to people about, how little that a little permission, perhaps, let's say, for example, a female who wanted to go and learn how to build was, were not able to do that. And you might have a young gay boy who might have felt, whose parents might have felt, well, he's not for that, he's not for building or making. Or even in my case, like, I think there's been moments in my own life where I've thought, I need to gravitate more towards the club or the music or these places, the kind of bright shining light that kind of beckons and invites you into this warmth. But actually, the older I get, the more I find that my queer self actually is my natural self. And and because of that, I kind of crave to be in natural surroundings to connect with it. And I lived in the West last year during the lockdown for 6 months on an island I spent a lot of time on in the Stirk. And I never felt more grounded or connected to myself and to my queerness, despite the fact that I was most likely the only queer person on the island for most of that time, and spending a lot of time by myself. So there's something about the context of being away from the city or just being in a new context and using different types of skills that I think that can connect us to parts of ourselves that maybe we were held back from. And, we've got an access program now in Common Knowledge where we're going to be offering a place in all of our introductory building courses to somebody who's faced barriers, whether you're from a marginalized community, whether you're a traveler or you're somebody who's experienced direct provision, an asylum seeker, a refugee, whether you're from a disadvantaged background, whether you're a queer person who's felt like they never had access to the skills. We want to hear from you, and we want to let us know that learning these skills would make a meaningful difference in your life. And we're going to be offering places on the courses. They're week long, and we will have camping made available. We'll be feeding everybody, and I just think it'll be a great experience. And sitting by the campfire, I can't wait to talk to those people and learn together.
Absolutely, and that reminds me of another thing that you've set up in your time, and I want to ask a little bit more about going west, about the kind of love affair that you've had with Inishturk, being out there, and also the festival that you set up and run, Turkfest. I've heard you describe it. I haven't had the pleasure of going. I know that in those descriptions, it sounds like a similar feeling, right? You're around the campfire, there's food, there's people connecting from whatever different backgrounds, areas, what is it that's drawn you west so much? Like, what do you find there? And how is it going from the city, I guess, one of the most populous parts of the island, right to one of the most rural and remote, and how does that feel?
Feels great. I love contrasts and experiencing contrasts, and I think I could kind of peg myself as bi-coastal curious almost. I love the idea of kind of existing within the city and in the most remote part of the country, because they connect me to different parts of myself and to different people. And I was lucky to have been dragged around the West kicking and screaming when I was a kid but equally I really enjoyed it, you know, the adventure of exploring. And it's only grown as a love affair for me, really, with the West. And there's a particular point I can sit on in Inishturk where I think I calculated you can see like 150 kilometers of coastline from there, because the Inishturk sits in the middle of this kind of big bay, and it's so grounding. You know, it's just you're looking at this massive scale. You're looking at these huge mountains. You're looking at this huge piece of water, and I just find that so peaceful. I think now, like, you're experiencing the shift of people going west. There is that you know, it's undeniable that it's because the housing is cheaper. In many parts, not all parts. Some parts, you know, it's prohibitively expensive. With people with second homes, that kind of stuff. But I think that what's also drawing people west is that feeling of kind of reconnection with themselves. And also, you know, we're so in the laptop, on the phone. Technology has changed our lives so incredibly in the last 20 years that when you're in the countryside, or for me, when I'm in the West, you know, I will go out every day for a big long walk. When I'm in the city, I will now, because I got a little dog in the last few months, and it's been brilliant to do that here in Dublin a little bit more. But I'm just more drawn to the landscape in the West. And I think as time goes on, we'll see more and more people, as we did during the lockdowns and you know, the inability to travel, just enjoying our countryside and our nature more and more. There is something there, you know, that's kind of semi mystical and just very alluring for the soul. And that's what kind of keeps me going back. Now I'm moving to Ennistimon, which is where Common Knowledge will be based, but Ennistimon is practically a metropolis, you know, compared to Inishturk, where there's only 50 or 60 people, but the most resourceful 50 or 60 people that I think I've ever met.
It's amazing, and it's inspiring, and it makes me definitely just want to stand up, walk away from the desk and go. But before that, I'd love to go back, and you referenced your childhood there and being dragged kicking and screaming, I think, around, but secretly enjoying it, which is a nice image of you going around the West. And yeah, I'm just curious, like, what was your childhood like? How did you feel about Ireland in general? It's been a little bit of a theme in these interviews that people saw the country quite differently when they were younger to how people are starting to see it now. And yeah, just talk me through a little bit of the kind of geography and emotional geography of those kind of formative years.
Yeah, I mean, you know, my experience of Ireland as a place was geographical and physical rather than kind of emotional or kind of connected to nationality or anything like that. And, you know, I had these figures in my life between my parents and my grandparents who were all very connected to the physical world. And, you know, that's how I experienced Ireland growing up. I never felt that sense of connection. I never felt Irish until the day of the marriage equality referendum results. And I very specifically just remember catching myself and thinking, oh, I get it now. I get why somebody would wrap themselves in a tricolour, because they're like, this is who we are, you know? And I never felt like this is who we were until that happened. I never felt like Ireland was a place for me. And I think it wasn't just the marriage equality referendum. I mean, Ireland had changed quite a bit by that stage anyway. And, you know, even when we talk about queerness, I think there's, you know, Ireland is a country that has experienced so much oppression in the last hundreds of years that I think you can really relate that to the experience of queer people of a generation. And I think that Ireland is having its own coming out in the last 10 or 20 years. You know, it's kind of reconnecting with itself and getting back to its own nature, which is more connected to the land, more connected to who we are, our culture. We're seeing a resurgence of the language, you know, and a celebration of Irish materials and ingredients and food and music. And, you know, I think that's all about the shackles of oppression continuing to fall away. And I can really relate to that as a queer person who, you know, for the first 20 years of my life, didn't ever know if I was going to be kind of free to live just in a way that felt natural to me. So I think there's a real parallel, you know, between those two things.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny that you use that word natural, like, and you've also said that in a way that the space where you feel most comfortable is those natural environments, you know, as well as the kind of classic queer communities that we find in nightlife and various places. Like, so something, you know, it's a coming out and maybe a return, you know, we hear about rewilding, you know, a return to nature in a way, you know, both in a, like, one theme that came up over the course, another show in the series, I was speaking to Giles Shay, who's an artist from Laois and currently based in Limerick, and we were talking about the kind of influence of queerness on his art, but also on just, you know, he was. So check out his art if you haven't seen it. It's really good. It's really striking. But like, he has a lot of hyper masculine images, balaclavas and various things that are in there. And he was saying that was in part a response to things that he saw in childhood, where he was trying to just reconfigure those ideas of masculinity and everything else. And definitely, you know, I'd see each of you as and the reason that I was keen to have you guys on the show is because, you know, in thinking about Athbheochan and that this idea of a rebirth, I wanted to pick some of the brightest sparks that I can see so far of that and just have a chat. But like, it is an interesting idea that this cultural renaissance that I feel is happening and that I'm trying to showcase on these shows is happening in the wake of that marriage referendum. It's happening in the wake of a few pieces of political change, and of course there's still more to come and more needed. And, you know, I think it's the housing issue is just such an important thing, but it's just really interesting that you draw that parallel as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, the Irish sense of masculinity has really come on a lot in the last, you know, 20 years as well. It's kind of okay to be soft now. And I'm not just talking about, you know, the queer masculinity. I'm talking about, you know, our relationship with, I guess men's relationships with themselves has just improved. That's what it is. And I think men have permission now to be softer, more sensitive, more open. And I think that's something that can only benefit everybody, you know, this kind of softer masculinity. You know, when I was younger, it was very much expected that, you know, I'd be playing sport and doing all these kind of hypermasculine activities where actually I had just no interest. And luckily the internet arrived. And, you know, I met the other nerds who wanted to play with technology, and technology became this very freeing thing because it allowed us to kind of connect with each other in a way which we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. We would have been stuck in the changing room or on the pitch being really unhappy. So, you know, I think there's, again, for me, the technology is always the backdrop to the change in the last 20 years. But I think, you know, it's not the end point. It's not the goal. And I think increasingly it will fade into invisibility as we kind of, you know, as it gets more advanced, hopefully we'll become more visible and less present in our lives.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, it's very interesting. And like, you know, nature and technology, and we can see them as opposites, but, you know, maybe they fold back into a more harmonious relationship. The next thing I'd like to ask, which I'd reference there as well, you know, maybe this even plays into that, which is, so, and you're one of the biggest, you know, big picture thinkers that I know of. You always inspire me and even stretch my thinking. So I'm really excited to ask you this question, which is about the future. And, you know, you can see these vectors that you're talking about. You have these kind of, you can see that there's these demographic changes, geographic changes, people moving, you know, economic things driving that. And then you also have these more intuitive things that you can feel, which are around, you know, things that you are finding yourself drawn to and that the rest of society may find as well, you know, whether that's reconnecting with nature or community or, you know, just making things physically with our hands. If we multiply that times, you know, 100, 1,000, what would Ireland look like in, you know, 500 years, 1,000 years? And, you know, if all of this goes well, what could we hope as we fly over the the coastline? Like, what will we be looking down on?
Well, there's a big picture, and then there's 1,000 years away. So I'll just take out my crystal ball. But no, seriously, I think Ireland will be, again, I feel this real potential return to nature for us as a, a kind of a thriving natural country. Another signal we can see everywhere is reforestation, and people are adopting kind of more permaculture mindset. People adopting just more sustainable and green, the concept of abundance. And my dream for Ireland is that we will be abundant, and it's something that Michael John Gorman, who is the founder of Science Gallery, mentioned to me recently. It's a writer, Michael Brungart, and I was reading his ideas around abundance, and he just shared this really nice thought about a tree not being merely sustainable, but being abundant in what it offers, because not only is it a life form that is living and green and growing, but it also provides shelter for animals. It provides a carbon sink. It provides support for an entire ecosystem of animals, birds, insects. It might even bear fruit. It also stimulates rainfall. It's part of this greater system. And Michael John just asked the question, why can't humans be similarly abundant? And I think this is a really valuable, dream for us to hold. And it's something definitely for common knowledge now that I think fits with our vision of the future. That people should feel empowered and confident to create a life that feels abundant, regardless of their means, by connecting with these skills that they can learn, by connecting with communities and resources they can access. And I guess that's what we're focusing on at the moment, is equipping people with that sense of agency, to have this, but via the means of creating a sustainable, affordable, joyful home. Because really, if you can't create that, it's very difficult to reach the higher stages of Maslow's hierarchy, and if you haven't got your basic needs met.
100%. And I'm just personally struggling to see how we progress without everybody having that sustainable, joyful and abundant home as a basis. Like, I kind of think, part of my vision that's growing is like, everyone needs a small holding. Like, by right, like if everybody has a home and can grow their own food, it takes massive amounts of pressure. It's like universal basic income, but it goes even further than that, because the income, it's still money, it's still subject to all of the craziness of the economy and arbitrary definitions of value. Whereas if you can actually feed yourself, of course you will still need to trade with people for different things, but I think it's massive. And I want to ask on behalf of the people who are, I'm sure, listening, that are thinking, I want this home. How can I get this? How can I not feel so useless next time I need to fix something, build something, or, use these skills? How can people tie in with common knowledge? What's coming up, and how can people take part?
Yeah, well, what I'd say to anybody wondering that is, maybe have a think about just an alternative approach to achieving housing, to achieving a more nutritious diet. Land ownership is obviously very prohibitive and a huge privilege in Ireland, but there are parts of the country where it's significantly cheaper. That you can buy old properties and small holdings. There's alternative approaches, for example, creating a tiny home, which we're going to be teaching people to build this summer, where you can build your own tiny home for about €15,000. I know that's a lot of money, but when you think about the average rent in Ireland being, well over €1,000 in Dublin anyway, per month, if you can get yourself out of that rent trap, and tiny home, I think, is a good first step. You can start to build your own permanent holding, whether it's land, a home, a garden. And so what we're doing this summer is we're equipping people with basic skills for building in our build school courses. And that's a 5-day course, and you'll learn the fundamentals of building in the morning, and then you'll go and apply them in building tiny homes in the afternoon. You'll be doing this with a bunch of other people who are really, I guess, in the same place. They're just curious about what they can do themselves and want to learn about building, whether it's for a project or to just feel more empowered. We're also doing other courses, for example, on creating organic gardens, on building clay oven in your garden. We're doing one on building your own furniture. So we've got a whole range of different courses, and they're just the first courses we've made available, and they're available on our website at ourcommonknowledge.org. You can also follow us on Instagram at common_K_, and the same handle on Twitter. And by all means, sign up for our newsletter. That's where we'll be letting people know about upcoming courses. We'd love to hear from anybody who's got any questions or is interested in working with us. And definitely for anybody who feels like this is it's not something that's for them, or it feels prohibitive in terms of accessing it in terms of cost, check out our access program. It's on the homepage. And if you can't find it, just get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from everybody. And the closing date for applications is the end of March. So you've still got a couple of weeks.
Exciting. Well, I'm there, and I'm sure lots of people will be as well. I feel like we could, like I could do a whole another interview with you again. So I almost just want to ask you to even come back to the show, because I feel like we've only scratched the surface. But thank you so much. That was really lovely. This show is finishing off our initial series, and what a nice way to end. But we have good news, which is that we're going to have a permanent home on Dublin Digital Radio. So if you have enjoyed these shows, then definitely hop over there and follow us, and we're going to try and get Fionn back again. But for now, thanks so much, Fionn. That was amazing, and yeah, just can't wait to see all the great things that you guys are going to do with Common Knowledge.
Thanks, Niall. Looking forward to staying tuned to Athbheochan as well. Thanks a million for having us on.
I just lay low, I can't lay back. All my anxious voices, it was way back. And I lost my youth, I wanna way back. And the walls to be, I wanna break that. All the fakeness, I don't play that. Hate the ways that they chat, try to pull me on the same track. No way lad, le the Chalín, she a Cahav, Nila Sagum, Fionn Godrift, Chame Glita, Ima Chola, Kubla Mila, Solar Stop me, Nima Kita, August Tosa, Lanadina, Toshi Lofa, B McDowsa, Glocka Shota, Kubla Bangers, Saxa Pota, B McDowsa, Egan Flat, Krishy Cash, Terme Shah, Aaron August, Nia Ran, she extona make Ran, Toshi Tap, Toshi